Welcome to the Legal Insight podcast by HHQ, where we help you unpack the world of law, business, and tech with the latest legal developments. I'm your host, Zach, the Business Development Director at HHQ. And in today's episode, we're actually tackling a very crucial topic for the tech industry, which is licensing for cybersecurity service providers under the Cybersecurity Act 2024 or CSA 2024. And joining me today are three very distinguished members of our technology practice group, starting with Johnson, the head of the group, as well as Khai Yi, the co-head, and Nicole, an associate of the technology practice group. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Good to see you again.
Happy to be here, Zach.
Great. Let's kick things off with you, Khai. With cyber threats escalating daily, how do you actually view the necessity of licensing requirements for cybersecurity service providers?
Thank you for the question, Zach. Like you have pointed out, with the increasing activity when it comes to cyber threats and cybersecurity incidents, right? And the amount of attempts that are out there, it's definitely very crucial for us to have these licensing requirements when it comes to provider of cybersecurity services, right? Because ultimately, when it comes to so-called the war against the cyber threats and cyber criminals, cybersecurity service providers are pretty much you can call them the first line of defense. Some would like to call your firewall the first line of defense, right? But the way I see it is firewall is really the last line of defense. And really the people that are providing the first aid and people that are really standing at the front line are the cybersecurity service providers. And given how crucial cybersecurity is nowadays to organizations in this digital world, it is very important for there to be a licensing requirement to make sure that companies know who to engage, or rather, they only engage credible service providers, reliable service providers, right? So it is very important for there to be a licensing requirements so that companies can know who to engage, right? There is so-called quality assurance to know that all these registered service providers are credible and are reliable. So that's why I think that this licensing regime is one of the key ways in how the Act can help strengthen the cybersecurity landscape in our country.
Great, thanks, Khai. Now, Johnson, given how essential it is, for these requirements to be in place, do you think these licensing requirements will reshape the cybersecurity landscape in a significant manner?
Yes, Zach. I think it's already happening right now. In our previous episodes, we have been discussing in great length about the implementation about the Cybersecurity Act 2024. And right now, Malaysia, we have also recently made new amendment to the Personal Data Act. So right now, whenever there is a cybersecurity incident or data breach, organization would need to engage professionals such as lawyers and also cybersecurity provider, whether for notification purposes or for recovery measures. However, without proper licensing, there is always a lack of trust within the industry because they have no idea whether the particular cybersecurity provider company is licensed or not. So I sincerely believe by implementing a very strong and a very robust cybersecurity licensing requirement in the market, this can actually cultivate and enhance a culture of trust and accountability within the sector.
Thanks, Johnson. Now, Nicole, on to you. Given how new the Cybersecurity Act actually is, how has your experience been as an associate in navigating the licensing requirements outlined in the Act?
So I think the licensing requirements, Khai and Johnson have talked about the rationale behind the requirements, the importance of it. I do believe that the CSA is quite clear in delineating who exactly needs to be licensed, the requirements and so on. But I do understand that there's still some market confusions as to compliance timelines and so on. So today we're here to clarify some of the confusions that might be out there.
Thanks, Nicole. So now let's go on. Let's move on to clear some confusions here, clear the air, right? So Johnson, let's get into the specifics. What are the key criteria that determine whether a company needs to apply for a cybersecurity service provider license?
So under the law, it is very clear that any companies that intends to provide cybersecurity services or any companies that advertise that it provides cybersecurity services will require this license under the CSA. And this requirement is actually particularly important in the market because as we actually understand the cybersecurity market, there are many companies out there. They will be marketing, advertising, and making claims that they are the one providing cybersecurity services. But in reality, they would actually subcontract these services to a third-party company to their subsidiaries. So the law make it very clear, regardless you are the one actually providing the services or you are just a company, a main contractor advertising and making claims that you are providing these services, both of the companies, both categories will need to apply for the licensings under the law.
Khai, could you elaborate on what exactly constitutes a cybersecurity service under this new framework?
Essentially, the regulations, the licensing regime seeks to regulate or rather license two specific types of cybersecurity services. Let me break down the two of them in turn, right? The first of it being Managed Security Operations Center Monitoring Services. So as its name might suggest, it essentially means, or rather refers to services that cybersecurity service providers provide to help you to manage and monitor your IT environment, constantly trying to seek out to see whether there are unauthorized access to your IT environment, to your digital environment, to your computer system, right? So in a sense, it's like a constant scanning, constant checking of the sanctity and the integrity of your IT system. Mm-hmm. And should they notice or detect any outsiders or outside threats, right, or compromise, they will then help you with the whole process of reacting and responding to the threat. Now, the second service being the penetration testing services. And I think this one, a lot of us will be very familiar, right? Pen test is really just, there are many, many methods for you to do pen test, but essentially it refers to services where service providers help you to probe your system, to find loopholes, to find vulnerabilities and exploits that cyber threat actors can sort of exploit, right, to gain access, unauthorized access to your system. So they will find all these vulnerabilities and help you to patch them and will advise you and recommend you on how to deal with them moving forward.
Now, Nicole, if a company wishes to offer both types of services, managed security operations center monitoring services or pen test services, do they need separate licenses or separate applications?
Not at all, Zach. So if a company does provide both types of services, what they can do is they can apply for both services under one license application. However, of course, if one company starts off by providing one type of service and then they intend to provide the other type of service in the future, of course, that would be a separate application down the line.
Great. Now, Johnson, what about subcontractors, right? Do they also require an independent license or can they just tag along with the main contractor?
Yes, I think just now I have briefly touched upon this point. So in the market, actually most of the companies, they are not the main contractor in providing these services. A lot of companies, they actually call themselves as a subcontractor or third-party cybersecurity provider. Yes. And technically, they are not the one in the market actively advertising or actively marketing these products. They are, I would say that at the back end, providing these services using a separate legal entity company. So in this case, the law make it very clear. This boils down to the licensing requirement 101. Whether you are the one providing these services or you are the one in the market advertising that you provide these services, you will need a license. So this will actually clear any form of confusion. As long as you are providing cybersecurity services, regardless whether you are the one marketing it, whether you are the one actually in the market selling these services, you will still need a license.
Now let's talk about companies that actually provides services exclusively to related companies within a corporate group, sort of like an internal service provider. Are they required to obtain a license as well? Maybe Khai, you can answer this question.
Yeah, the answer to that is no. And do allow me to elaborate further. Essentially, this is one of the few exemptions provided under the licensing regime, right? If a cybersecurity service provider is really providing only the services only to related parties within their own group of companies itself, then you don't need to apply for a license. Now, of course, the question is then, what constitutes a related company? The regulations itself and the act doesn't really define it. So I think it's safe to say that we will just have to refer to the Companies Act, right, to see the definition there. So essentially, related companies has to be, if it's a holding company that owns 51% or rather 50% or above 50%, you need to own majority shares. Consequently, for subsidiary as well, it has to be a subsidiary that you have control over. So within that framework, only you will not be required to apply for a license.
Understand. So I can't just sign like a membership agreement, like
No,
a member.
like maybe 5% of shares,
Yeah.
shareholdings, you will still have to apply for a license.
Just to jump in, Khai. So what if, let's say, a lot of time the companies initially the initial intention is to just provide cybersecurity services to the subsidiary companies,
Yep.
and then after a few years they actually want to commercialize these
Yep.
services, and then later on they say that I want to go to the market. In that
Yeah.
case, do they need a license?
Then it's very obvious, of course, in the initial phase of you only providing these services internally, perhaps it's a new service offerings.
Yeah.
So you are not confident in providing it externally, right? So you only provide it internally, then the exemption would apply. But as and when you want to commercialize that product and make that product available to customers, paying customers, then you definitely need to apply for a license before you can commercialize it. I believe that point is very, very clear.
Thanks, guys. Now, Nicole, how does this licensing requirement actually impact foreign cybersecurity service providers who are actually looking to operate within Malaysia?
Sure. So for foreign companies looking to offer such services within Malaysia, they would of course have to also apply and obtain the relevant license. And this actually applies regardless of, any existing licenses they may have in other jurisdictions. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule, as Khai has mentioned earlier, one of the exceptions being that if that foreign company does intend to provide cybersecurity services to their related companies in Malaysia, then they would fall under the exception. Other than that, they would still have to go through the application process for the relevant license.
There's no escape here, right? Now, Johnson, how can companies who are looking for service providers actually verify if that service provider is licensed or not?
This is, I would say, that the most important question.
Yeah.
And then the answer is very straightforward. So there is a NACSA website. What we can do is we can just go to NACSA website, and then there should be a portal listing down all the licensed cybersecurity provider in Malaysia. And then right now, because the approval process is still ongoing, so from what we last checked this morning, there isn't a company that has been properly listed on the website yet. But we do understand that the full list should be published very soon, potentially January 2025.
Khai, let's talk about repercussions for non-compliance.
Zach, if you recall, I think during our last recording on Cybersecurity Act, we did break down the various degree of penalty under the Act, right? So for non-compliance with the licensing requirement, the Act actually imposes the most severe penalty available under the Act. So it includes fines up to 500,000 ringgit or imprisonment for up to 10 years or both. So essentially, I think this underscores the importance of adhering strictly to the licensing regulations.
Thanks, Khai. Now, finally, Johnson. I mean, we've gone through the steps. It's pretty straightforward,
Yeah.
right? If you fall within the service providers, you're providing the services under the Act. You can get yourself licensed unless you're providing services internally within related companies. So, what are the steps companies should take now to prepare for these upcoming requirements? And what's the timeline for companies in obtaining these licenses?
So let me start with the timeline for these licensing requirements. So the formal application actually began October this year, and there is a 3 months grace period for company to apply, starting from October until the 31st December 2024. So within these 3 months periods, cybersecurity service provider, they are allowed to actually provide these services without a license. But what's going to happen is starting from 1st January 2025, for companies that are still providing cybersecurity services without a license, they are going to face severe consequences, as mentioned by Khai Yi earlier. So I would say that right now, for all companies that are actually listening right now, what are they supposed to do is to first make an internal assessment to first examine whether they are in fact providing cybersecurity services. If the answer is yes, they should start talking to their lawyers. They should understand what are the procedures in order for them to obtain the license and really get ready, because there is only a short period of time, a short window of 3 months. And after that, if they are still providing these services without a license, they will get into big trouble.
Right. That's all the time we have for today. You've been listening to the Legal Insight podcast by HHQ. You've heard the three lawyers here. Get ready, get in touch with your lawyers to stay compliant, whether you're a main contractor, whether you're a subcontractor, as long as you're providing cybersecurity services that's enshrined under the Act. It's essential for you to actually get licensed. Thank you for tuning in to the Legal Insight podcast by HHQ. Join us next time as we continue to explore the implications or the important legal topics affecting your business. Until then, stay informed and stay compliant.